And the premise of the jungle is basically to take those remaining 58 in your case, or the remaining quota of any case, of any
Yeah,
course, and put them through humidity, discomfort, out your comfort zone. You don't have a base, you're out in
yeah,
the wilderness, and you've got to deal with the challenges that that presents. Dehydration is a huge one. We've had a few guys
yeah,
come on to us that have had to VW or been taken off because of hydration issues. So it's
yeah.
then managing that, but it's basically 6 weeks of completely non-trainable in the UK discomfort to see who's got what's left.
Absolutely.
So
It's one of
talk us through
those.
it.
It's one of those. It's an environment that is very test. It's a very testing environment in many ways. Um, and it definitely separates the boys from the men. There are people who pass the hills and they jack on day one in the jungle because they throw you into it, and it's like I was saying before, when that group becomes a more focused group and there's less people, then becomes more detail, right? So you've got the same amount of staff looking after a lot less people, so there's more eyes on you, and they get to know you at that point. So now they're looking for not just if you can get from A to B with a burger on your back in a certain time, however you get there. You're not judging how you get there. You can go any way you want. If you turn up at the checkpoint, you've passed. However, when you go to the jungle, they're starting to look at your soldiering ability because at the end of the day, you need to be a soldier. That's at the top of the priorities for them is that can you operate in the way that they need you to operate on operations. That's the long and the short of it. And there're just some people who aren't cut out for it or just don't like it. And that's just the bottom line. And some people that are great at it and love it. So when you've got a lot less people and then you get 4 or 5 man patrols with a DS, and then you're starting to have to develop or demonstrate new skill. And it's not just demonstrating it like you would in the infantry. You're talking like granular level details that you just cannot get away with. The simplest of things. And it is essentially applying some really basic soldiering skills very, very well. And that's really what they're looking for at that point. Because they're still not looking for the finished article. They're looking at someone who's got the aptitude mentally and physically to learn and develop those skills further on. Because obviously life in that regiment, you have to be developing new skills all the time because technology is changing, tactics are changing. There's a lot of things that are always evolving, so you have to adapt to that. And I think the adaptation of what you have to do is one of the most important things. So there are some people who I saw who were very set in their ways, good at what they did, but they just couldn't assimilate new skills as well as someone else. They were just too, it was too ingrained within them to operate a certain way. And sometimes that came from the more experienced guys, actually.
That's a really
You know?
applicable lesson to each and every one of us, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah,
good funny example. When I used to work in the pub trade for Heineken in London, and this was sort of 2017, 2018, when there was all the stuff around duty going up and good pubs are being shafted by the government, etc., etc. But whenever I had that conversation with publicans or landlords, whatever you want to call them,
hmm,
the ones that were saying I've been doing it for this way for years, I know what I'm doing. You shouldn't tell me what I should be doing to my bar in terms of upgrading products, etc., for higher priced, better beers. They were the ones that went out of business the following year, but they were
yeah,
blaming others because they'd been doing it their way for so long. So there's a real world example, an interesting one.
absolutely, yeah,
I didn't expect to be talking about that at any point soon, but that's exactly the same thing, isn't it? It's you separated those that were adaptable and those that weren't, and
yeah,
the whole reason I suffered from depression in the first place was because I was so stuck in my ways that when I was forced to adapt or staying the same was the wrong decision. So
yeah,
now I'm highly adaptable in every sort of
hmm,
facet of my life, and I'm much happier, much more successful, and much more malleable to the situation that I'm in than I was before. So it's fascinating to
excellent.
hear that that was something that you dealt with in the jungle under those conditions. So you passed out. You were one of. You might remember the number, you might not, but it seems there's a number stuck in your head. How many of you passed out at the end?
So from the end of the jungle, you get very few will fail. It's almost like they always remember like the day that we, because you get told when you come back to Hereford if you've passed or not.
That must be a long flight.
You've got, you've got to, yeah, yeah. You just take the words out of my mouth there. It was one of those real nerve-wracking experiences because, especially like, because what happens, the DS all get around the table and they go through every single person, because all the DS get to know every single individual. And maybe one DS that thinks you're a good guy and one guy who thinks you're not such a good guy. So it's a bit of a Chinese parliament as far as how they, you know, deliberate on who's going to pass, who's going to fail. So I think from, and there's a lot of people VW in the jungle, by the way. There's a lot of VWs because of the fact that it's just such a humid, testing, you know, very claustrophobic environment because you're under the canopy of the trees. You're not like out in the sun. You know, you really don't really see a lot of sky the whole time you're in there. It's just under this thick canopy of trees the whole time, and it's like 4 weeks. So you got like the live firing phase, which is really testing as well. Is actually quite a nerve wracking experience because of the fact that it's live firing, it's very close proximity, and you're just scrutinised for every single detail of every single skill that you're applying. So that there's a lot of anxiety with that phase, I would say. I always remember that. Just like get real fucking jitters before going on a range. You know, you're scared. You know, you're just like it's not so scared of being shot. You're just because you're so close to everyone, but you're just scared of getting something wrong. So so that's a really testing part, and then in the actual jungle itself, because you got build up training as well. So you get 2 weeks build up training. You got range package, then you get 4 weeks in the jungle. So I think the whole jungle phase is like 8 weeks, and within that 4 week test phase of the when you're in the jungle, that's the real tough part. And people either, like I say, people either adapt to it or they don't. I'd never been in the jungle before, so it was a new thing for me. But I think that was good because I actually enjoyed it. It was frustrating and it was hard, but I always knew that no matter what I do with this course, all I need to do is get to the end and try my best, I will have learned a hell of a lot that's going to benefit me anyway, right? Although I was trying to pass. So at the end of that phase, you then don't get told until you're back in Hereford whether you've passed or not. And I always remember like being back in the cinema room at the training squadron block in the camp, and then it's a bit like when they do it in X Factor when they've got like the two rooms of people. It was like that. So we're all sat in the one room. So alphabetically, the nominal roles called out, and being Bruce, mine was always towards the beginning. And I don't need to worry about these people because I'm probably never going to see them again. But the people who failed, you kind of had a rough idea because they'd probably been pulled aside at some point in the jungle to say, look, this final exercise, this is like your moment. This is going to make or break you. You need to either step it up or you're going to be failing, right? So I hadn't had that chat. I hadn't had a conversation like that, so I hadn't ever been pulled aside. So I was fairly confident, but you just don't know. And I genuinely didn't have a clue. I thought maybe they're going to say I'm too young or whatever. So I got to the end and we're sat there, and the training officer comes in. He says, "Right, the following names." No, it was the chief instructor comes in, and he says, "The following names go and see the training officer." So the training officer's in charge of the course. The chief instructor is like the head DS. He says, "Go and see the training officer. Following names." So I'm thinking alphabetically, is it going to be read out that way so I can kind of be sure? And then all I need to do is think about the names that have been called out because you know everyone in the course. You're thinking, right, good guy, you know, one of those ones. So they started calling the names out, and it got past B, and then the next name that got called out was like wanker. So then, and the remaining, the whole list basically, it was all the dodgy, like maybe nots, and some definitely nots. There was some guys that were like had got to the end and just weren't ever going to get in. So I saw this. I had this list being called out. I thought my name's not on it alphabetically, so I'm pretty safe. But then they got sent out and had to go and see the train officer, and it was about half. It was like 50% of that. So I think, and then obviously people had jacked in the jungle. So I think there was something like 18, but 18 at the end. SAS and SBS combined.
And those left in the
I think,
room got the thumbs
I think
up.
12. I think 12 guys that went to the regiment that year, yeah, and then like 6 or something went to the SBS. So yeah, so a small number, but as soon as those guys left, and I'm looking around me, seeing all the top blokes in the course around me, I'm thinking, yeah, I'm pretty confident. And then he says, right, so the train officer, you still don't get told. No one says anything. And all of a sudden, the train officer comes in at the end after telling them, obviously, they're off the course, then going, right, you guys are what we term as the hardcore element of this course. So from that, I think we lost about maybe three more before the end of selection. It was, and bear in mind that was like half the course at that point. You've still got 3 months. But when you think about how that's chopped up, you go 4 weeks hills, 8 weeks jungle. That's 3 months of two very important parts, and then you've got the remaining part, which is only one essential part after that. Really, they're all essential, but there's only one real testing part, which is combat and survival and escape and evasion. Which is, if you're going to lose anyone, it's probably going to be there. And we lost one guy on that, I think, and then we lost a couple more. I can't remember how, but in the last 4 weeks is the parachute course. So like there's like 2 week phases. From that point on, you're doing something different every 2 weeks. So like hills, jungle, you do like observation posts, you do communications, signals, you do the parachute course, and yeah, I think that's about it. Yeah, and then that's you done. So, so when you get towards the end, you know you're passed. It's a formality in some ways. As long as you don't refuse to jump out of a plane or do something grotesquely wrong, then you're passed.